Hello student, welcome to the lecture on Principle of Effective Communication. After this lecture, you will be able to learn the following objectives. Explain about the importance of effective communication, describe 7 C's of effective communication, describe 4 S of effective communication, explain the gateways of effective communication. Effective communication. Let us start with effective communication. Communication can be effective only if the receiver receives the message on the same form and context as is sent by the sender. When there is no mistake in interpretation and the sender gets the correct feedback, then communication can be termed as effective. To compose effective oral and written messages, one must apply certain communication principles. These principles provide guidelines for choice of content and style of presentation adapted to the purpose and receiver of the message. There is more to communication than just talk and gesture. Listening, understanding, and interpreting are as much integral to communication as words, verbal, written, or gesture. Yes, even gesture in communication play a crucial role in conveying and interpreting the message. Similarly, how we communicate or express ourselves goes a great way towards determining how our expressions are interpreted. To quote Karl Popper, it is impossible to speak in such a way that you cannot be misunderstood. Faulty or incomplete communication mar the purpose of communicating and may result in damaging consequences. Not everyone is equally endowed with the ability to effectively express himself, and this is where the importance of communication skills can be truly fatal. Communicating the right way is equally important in every walk of life, be it in personal, professional, or social life. The communication process involves a sender or communication source, the subject matter of communication, expression used for communicating and coding, the medium of communication, receives of the communication, and the interpretation thereof, decoding and feedback. Feedback is crucial in determining whether the communication has been understood by the receiver in the same light as intended by the sender. Let us try and understand the importance of communication in different works of our daily lives. The success of any business lies as much in networking and building sound professional relationship as it does in individual tact and business acumen. Communication is a crucial decisive factor in business relation. It is very important to say the right things at the right time and at the right place when dealing with partners, customers, stakeholders, media, and sometimes even competitors. Maintaining professional etiquette in oral and written business communication is of utmost importance and must not be taken lightly. 7 C's of effective communication. To compose effective written or oral messages, you must apply certain communication principles. These principles provide guidelines for choice of content and style of presentation adapted to the purpose and receiver of your message. Called the 7 C's, they are completeness, conciseness, consideration, concreteness, clarity, courtesy, and correctness. These 7 C's of effective communication are also called Principle of Effective Communication. Let us talk about each one of them. Courtesy, consideration. Consideration means preparing every message after keeping the receiver in mind by putting yourself in their place. The sender has to be tactful and sincere, use expression that show respect, emphasize the fact, be aware of the feelings of the others. In business world, almost everything starts and ends with courtesy and consideration. Much can be accomplished if tact, diplomacy, and appreciation of people are woven in the message. Courtesy stems from a sincere your attitude. It is politeness that grows out of respect and concern for others. Now, a few suggestions to be followed in this regard are: focus on you attitude instead of I attitude. The I attitude should be discarded in favor of you attitude to show respect and consideration towards the listener or receiver of the message. Show interest in the receiver and emphasize the benefits the receiver will gain out of the message. Emphasize positive and pleasant facts about the receiver of the message. Be sincerely tactful, thoughtful, and appreciative. Use expression that show respect. Choose non-discriminatory expression. True consideration and courtesy is a result of integrity and ethics in communication. Clarity, getting the meaning from your head into the head of the listener or reader accurately, is the purpose of clarity. Clarity of ideas add much to the meaning of the message. Clarity is achieved in part through a balance between precise language and familiar language. Simple language, words, and expression should be used. Choose familiar words. Familiar words are often conversational and appropriate for the situation, so they make a good part of speech or written communication. Technical terms and business jargon may be used in professional situations, but it should be avoided if the communication is with the person who is not acquainted with the terminology. Make effective paragraphs and sentences. Consider the characteristics like length of sentences and paragraphs, unity and coherence of paragraphs, and emphasis on the important parts of the paragraphs. Correctness message should not contain any wrong information. It should be authentic. Choose the right level of language. At the time of encoding, the sender should ensure that his knowledge about the receiver is comprehensive. The level of knowledge, educational background, and status of the decoder helps encoder in formulating his message. In case of discrepancy between the usage and comprehension of terms, miscommunication can arise. At the core of correctness are proper grammar, punctuation, and spelling. However, a message may be perfect grammatically but still insult or lose a customer. A few guidelines for assuring correctness in the message are: use the right level of language, formal or informal, and avoid substandard language or words. Check accuracy of figures, facts, and words. Maintain acceptable writing mechanics. Concreteness. Communicating concretely means being specific, definite, and vivid rather than vague and general. Often it means using denotative rather than connotative words. The benefits of the business professionals of using concrete facts and figures are obvious. Receivers know exactly what is required or desired. Using concrete language has some additional, less obvious advantages. When you supply specific for the reader or listener, you increase the likelihood that your message will be interpreted the way you intended. Moreover, concrete messages are more richly textured than general or vague messages. They tend to be more vivid, dynamic, and interesting. So a few guidelines can be used to compose concrete, convincing messages. Use specific facts and figures. Put action in your verbs. Choose vivid, image-building words. Credibility. This builds trust. If the sender can establish his credibility, the receiver has no problems in accepting his statement. Establishing credibility is not the outcome of a one-shot statement. It is a long drawn-out process in which the receiver, through constant interaction with the sender, understands his credible nature and is willing to accept his statement as being truthful and honest. Completeness and consistency. The business message is complete when it contains all the facts the reader or listener needs for the reaction. The sender and receiver differ in their mental filters. They are influenced by their backgrounds, viewpoints, needs, experiences, attitude, status, and emotions. Because of these differences, communication sender needs to access his message through the eyes of the receiver to be sure that he has included all relevant information. Now, while striving for completeness, the guidelines to be observed are: provide all necessary information, answer all questions asked, give something extra when desirable, provide all necessary information. To help one to make a message complete, it is helpful to answer the 5W question: who, what, when, where, and why. The approach to communication should be as far as possible consistent. There should be not much ups and downs that might lead to confusion in the mind of the receiver. If a certain stand has been taken, it should be observed without there being situation in which the sender is left groping for the actual content and meaning. Conciseness. Conciseness is saying what you have to say in fewest possible words. The message to be communicated should be as brief and concise as possible. Weighty. Language definitely sound impressive, but people would be suitably impressed into doing precisely nothing. As far as possible, only simple and brief statements should be made. Excessive information can also sway the receiver into either wrong direction or into inaction. Conciseness is a prerequisite to effective business communication. A concise message saves time and expense of both the sender and the receiver. Now, to achieve conciseness, a few suggestions can be observed. Eliminate wordy expression, include only relevant material, avoid unnecessary repetition. Let us find out more about each of them. Eliminate wordy expression. Wordiness in expressions can be removed by using single word substitute instead of phrases, replacing long conventional statements with concise versions, avoiding overuse of phrases, omitting the use of which and that clauses, and by limiting the use of passive voice. Include only relevant material. The effective concise message should not only omit wordy expression but also irrelevant statements. A couple of suggestions to be observed in this regard are: stick to the purpose of the message, delete irrelevant words and rambling sentences, omit information obvious to the receiver, avoid long introduction, unnecessary explanation, excessive adjectives, etc. Get to the important point tactfully and concisely. Avoid unnecessary repetition. Sometimes repetition is necessary for emphasis, but unnecessary repetition leads to dullness and makes the message boring. Suggestions to be followed in this regard are: use a shorter name after you have mentioned the longer one once. Use pronouns or initials rather than repeat long names. Combine two or more sentences by using subordinate clauses or phrases. 4S of effective communication. Now, though the 7 C's of communication are sufficient as principle of effective communication, but some authors also consider 4S. The 4S of effective communication are shortness, simplicity, strength, and sincerity. Let us talk about each of them in length. Shortness. Brevity is the soul of wit. The same can be said about communication. If the message can be made brief and verbosity done away with, then the transmission and comprehension of messages is going to be faster and more effective. Flooding messages with high-sounding words does not create a very lasting impact, as most of the time of the receiver will be lost in actually deciphering and comprehending the message. Simplicity. Simplicity, both in the use of the language and ideas, reveals clarity in the thinking process. It is normally a tendency that when an individual is himself confused, he tries equally confusing strategies to try and explain his point of view to the receiver. Simplicity should be revealed in the communication by using simple terminology and equal simple concepts. Strength. The strength of the message emanates from the credibility of the sender. If the sender himself believes in the message that he is about to transmit, there is bound to be strength and conviction in whatever he tries to state. Half-hearted statement add a touch of falsehood to the communication process. Sincerity. If the sender is genuine and sincere, it will be reflected in the manner he communicates. Suppose there is a small element of deceit involved in the interaction and the receiver is a keen observant, he would be able to sense the make-believe statement and no concrete relationship between the sender and receiver will materialize. Gateways to effective interpersonal communication. Effective interpersonal communication involves a number of essential skills. Let us talk about the most effective interpersonal skills that are the heart of effective communication. Interpersonal trust as a gateway to communication. Interpersonal trust as a gateway to communication. A key to effective communication is trust. Employees will not send accurate and open messages to their superior unless they trust them. They must have confidence that the superior will not use information the subordinates send to their detriment. They must believe that the information will not be inappropriate or inaccurately transferred to others. They must believe that their expression of feelings will be accepted without defensiveness or retaliation from the supervisor. In effect, the subordinates must believe that the supervisor is on their side and can be depended upon. Developing interpersonal trust. Now, how is interpersonal trust developed? The interpersonal trust is established by intrapersonal, interpersonal and organizational factors. Each of us brings to a relationship a level of expectation about the degree of trust we can have in other people. This level of trust is developed early in life from relationships of childhood and adolescence. If one's early associations are consistent, fair and trustworthy, one holds a favorable expectancy about one's new associate. An early negative experience predisposes us towards distrust. Similarly, experiences concerning trust within an organization are built through our experiences through people in the organization. The interpersonal factors also contribute to the level of trust for a person. Past experiences with a person influence one's present feeling of trust for that person. Top-level manager usually establish this climate if managers at the top of the organization trust one another and are fair, open and receptive. This atmosphere will permeate the entire organization. Top managers are cautious, deceptive and defensive. The total organization will show a lack of trust. Establishing interpersonal factors for trust. So what can the individual manager do to establish interpersonal trust? The managers at the middle or the lower level of the organization cannot change the climate of the total organization. He or she cannot change the interpersonal trust of another person, but the manager can change the interpersonal factors that influence his or her trust relationship. This is accomplished by communicating standards of integrity and fairness and in living by those standards. Trust is enhanced when one observes a consistent devotion to commands and consideration to others and fairness on the part of the person. The trust level is further raised when a person is tempted to violate the trust for personal gain but does not. For example, the supervisor who could blame subordinates for faulty work but accepts the failure as his or her own, or a subordinate who could have withheld important information but does not do so. Summary. Let us now summarize what we have learned in this lesson. Communication can be effective only if the receiver receives the message on the same form and context as is sent by the sender. Listening, understanding and interpreting are as much integral to communication as words, verbal, written or gesture. To compose effective oral and written messages, one must apply certain communication principles called the 7 C's. They are completeness, conciseness, consideration, concreteness, clarity, courtesy, correctness. The 7 C's of effective communication are also called principles of effective communication. The 4 S of effective communication are shortness, simplicity, strength and sincerity. Most effective interpersonal skills are interpersonal trust as gateway to communication, developing interpersonal trust, establishing interpersonal factors for trust.